Good evening and welcome to the March 28th, 2023 meeting of the Elementary School Building Committee. I will quickly run through our agenda and then we can go ahead and get started. So first we have some housekeeping to do. We have to approve meeting minutes and we have to approve invoices. Then we're going to get an update on the PSR submission, comments we've gotten from the MSBA, questions, and then the upcoming Facilities Assessment Subcommittee presentation that we have coming up tomorrow. We'll recap a couple of meetings that have happened with town departments, and then we'll look at proposals for wetlands filing. Yeah, sorry. It was because if there's a second L, it means something really different. So I just wanted to make wetlands filing proposal, and then the traffic study proposal, both of which will require a vote of the committee. We will talk about faculty and staff focus groups and a presentation of updated plans, precedents, and site designs, and then talk about next steps. And we are targeting wrapping up by 8 o'clock. So we'll go ahead and get started. In your packets, you had the meeting minutes for March 1st, 2023. Does anyone have any questions or comments related to those minutes? So I actually had one comment which may honestly have been on previous ones and I just didn't notice, but it says absent. So Irfan Nazrul is not on the building committee.
Okay.
Shahidul's our select board representative. So if we could remove him. Any other questions? Okay. Then I would seek a motion to approve the minutes of March 1st, 2023 with that single amendment.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
A motion by Mike. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jen. And we're all in person, so we don't have to do a roll call vote. So all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and it is unanimous.
Is that 6?
3, 4, 5, 6. Yes.
Okay.
6.
6-0. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is we need to pay some bills. We have 2 invoices in the packet. One is invoice CPM 11611 from Vertex in the amount of $19,624.75. The other one is invoice number 954200006 from Perkins Eastman in the amount of $85,110. Any questions or comments on the invoices? Okay, hearing none, I would look for a motion to approve the 2 invoices totaling $104,734.75.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Bill, second by Mike. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and so it is approved 6-0. Let's steal your pen. Okay.
That was Bill and Mike, right?
Bill and Mike, yes. And
Was editing the minutes. So the motion to approve the minutes was by Mike, but
No.
who?
motion to approve minutes
The
was
minutes.
Mike, second by Jen.
Okay, thank you.
Invoice was Bill, second Mike.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, next up is the update on the PSR submission, MSBA comments, and other stuff. Am I going to Jeff or Bob or Dan or?
So we've had some back and forth with the MSB over the last couple of weeks. We're still waiting on the formal comments as part of the review of the PSR. They have sent us some initial comments back. We focused on the Facilities Assessment Subcommittee, which is the FAS. That's the presentation that's in your packet. They've asked for things to be moved forward, including the elevations that you'll first see tonight. We're going to be showing to the MSBA tomorrow, which is the first look at the building from a massing standpoint. That presentation fits into their finite amount of 20 minutes, where Carol, Bob, and myself will make a presentation and then field questions from the MSBA, where they talk about the ED program and other aspects of the project. But once we have formal comments back, we'll share that with the building committee, and we expect that after the FAS meeting we'll receive those, so over the next 2 weeks or so. You guys want to color on that? Or?
No, I'll just say that
the plans that are submitted to the FAS are a snapshot in time, so we've been working with the educational leadership team to make refinements that you'll see tonight that will not be part of the FAS.
Okay. Any questions on any of that? Okay, we're just rolling through the agenda. So, recap of meetings with town departments. So, our Perkins and Vertex and a couple of us over the last couple of weeks have met with various town departments to update them on the progress of the project, particularly now that we have picked the preferred schematic design and location. We met with public safety, and we met with the town planner, DPW, conservation, and somebody else that I'm probably forgetting. And so we have a recap of just kind of what the key takeaways from that meeting were.
Yeah, we talked a lot about the wetlands that are on the site and what the next steps are there. We'll get a little bit later in the meeting to talking about the ANRAD process, which they suggested that we enter into sooner rather than later. One of the other pieces that we want to take a look at as part of that process is this pond that is in the backyard of the Starting Line Brewery, which is LEC had flagged it as a potential vernal pool, but when the Starting Line Brewery project was done, they discovered that there is fish in it, and that means that it is not a potential vernal pool. But they suggested we do that again. This is the time of year to do it in the spring when the aquatic life starts to kind of come back out of the ground. So that's why that proposal is coming in front of you now, because we want to get them out there and get a determination that this is a wetland, not a vernal pool, because they have different setbacks. We also talked about the property at 147 Hayden Row, which is over 75 years old, so it'll require a demo permit and be subject to historic, which could, if there's some interest in it, hold the project or the demolition of the building up by, I think, 18 months, up to 18 months. So I think we wanted to suggest that we put that out there sooner rather than later as well.
I'll get Norman to sign a permit application tomorrow to demo the building.
Okay.
What we do is we forward that to the historical people. The historical people then decide whether or not it's gonna be a significant building. And if they decide that it is significant, they have a hearing. And during the hearing, they decide whether or not they're gonna jerk you around for 18 months or just say, go ahead and take it down. The approval, however, is only good for 2 years. So, it's gonna be kind of dicey, probably not ready to tear it down for 2 years anyway.
Nope, I wouldn't think so. Not quite.
So we may have to work with the historical people. If they do come to a finding that it's okay, you can take it down, perhaps we'll have them extend that period to,
Yeah, 2.5 years would probably be to 3 years would probably be the
yeah.
best.
Potentially, they can determine that it's significant and it's 18 months. And then,
That is what that goes along with what we heard. We also talked about the amount of impervious surface that we are putting in. One of the reasons we have so much drive is because we selected the back part of the site, and that requires more impervious surface to get over to it. Pushes us over 5 acres. We have roughly 7 acres here. In and of itself, not that big of a deal, but we are also close to an environmental justice community within a mile. So those two things together mean that we are potentially, more than likely, if we still have this much acreage, triggering an EIR, which is an environmental impact report, which is a significant filing with the state, which could take anywhere from 12 to 18 months to get through, and has a lot of hoops and things that need to be done alongside it, and we will be subject to their commentary and requirements. So we are going to try, you'll see here, we've already started to try to reduce the amount of impervious pavement as much as possible to avoid this EIR process. We also learned that an earth removal permit is not required. We talked about timelines for submissions. Kind of lines up with most of the other communities I've worked in, that the end of DD, beginning of CDs is basically when the design is kind of set, is really the right time to start the process. So that's a ways away. We also hit on the parking, and this was part of the EIR conversation, was the amount of parking on site. Could that be reduced in some way or handled in a different way, like an impervious parking lot or a temporary lot or some lot that, you may not plow, if you don't need it. And the answer was yes, the total number of spots could be provided on the drawings, but not necessarily built with the project. And we could leave that, say, that back lot, the one that's all the way behind everything, as impervious surface or as like a gravel lot, which would not, eat into our acreage amount.
So the EIR, once you trigger the EIR, it opens you up to a lot more stringent review, and so that's why it's best to avoid that, because then they get into evaluating all aspects of the project and not just the thing that it was triggered for. So it's a much more involved review if we have to go down that road.
Yeah, we'd also have to reach out to that environmental justice community, which is not all in Hopkinton. So we would be subject to having to reach out to that community inside. I think they're in Ashland too. So it becomes a little more complicated.
So, are you suggesting that, I know this, so adjusting that secondary parking lot to something else, does that potentially get us down?
It's going to get us closer. About 2 acres is a lot.
Yeah, that's what
So
I was thinking.
we're also trying to look at combining some of these access roads into one instead of having a loop around. We have try to get it to be one road and try everything we can to try to reduce the amount of bituminous here. But we're not that close. There's 7 acres.
Yeah.
We're 2 acres off, which is quite a bit.
No, as I recall at Marathon, we had a similar situation, and we put a lot of, what do you call that, hot top? Allows the water to go through.
Pervious.
Yeah, you have pervious
Pervious
pavement, which we,
And the
in
fire
the
lane
next
in the back,
meeting,
yeah.
we talked to the fire department, and they were not interested at this project because we are anticipating using that road as a drop-off loop. So they felt that
Yeah, 'cause
at
the road they
Marathon,
did is
it's
kind of-
only for them kind of thing, and at this
Yeah.
building,
It's
it
kind
would
of a
not.
secondary road. divided.
Yeah. Yep.
Do we have the opportunity to use it in the parking areas that are separate from the roads that the fire department would use?
I think the issue is they get salted.
It's
and
a
sanded.
problem with salting and sanding. It clogs up the pores. It becomes something you have to vacuum.
Yeah.
And
You
when
can,
you,
you
if
can
you're
salt
using
it, you can't sand
Yeah.
it, so, but and there was sodium chloride, there's things that you can do that we've done in other towns to maintain those lots, but the frequency at which you lose that lot is the trade-off we have to talk about.
Other questions about the town department meeting? So we'll talk about public safety?
So we also met with the police department, fire department together. That was really an effort to kind of go back. We had met with them earlier, and this was let's reintroduce where we ended up meeting, and kind of talk about some of their requirements so that we have some of these things now in schematics. And we'll meet with them again during the schematic design process. So this wasn't the only. This was more of a reintroduction. We talked about the fire lane width, which is now 20 feet per code. It was 18, I think, when Marathon was built.
It was 20, but we got relief.
You got relief?
Yeah.
We talked about location of hydrants around the loop and how far apart they want them to be. There was a lot of talk about fencing the play areas. They had mentioned that previously, that they felt that a 5-foot fence around the play area was going to be highly preferred, especially since it's in the front of the building and on this kind of loop roads where someone could theoretically come in and drive right out. So they felt that was important to them, as well as some camera coverage and to cover the roadways entering and exiting. And then we just went into window numbering, door numbering, building lettering, just strategies that help us lay out the drawings better and have a knowledge base now so that we don't get into drawing. So we oftentimes draw and we label things and find out later that that's not the way they want it labeled, and then there's a lot of work to do later. So we've decided that I think that's better to do it now. And then we hit on the water pressure, which we think we all know there's water pressure and flow problem on Hayden Row. That probably still exists. Tim was polite enough to give me the report that they did for Marathon. We'll probably want to do another, but we don't think anything's changed, so for now, we'll use that data as the basis. So are there any questions on the
I don't think it'll be-
meeting with the police and fire?
Building,
No, I think we'll say this one in particular because last time we met with police and fire, we were pretty focused on the Hayden Row site. So I don't think there was a lot new in this meeting, which was
No.
good. Okay. Moving right along.
So we want to talk about a couple of proposals that we have up and coming, and I also want to talk about the finances that are remaining and the risks that are out there. So maybe we're going to go to the next slide. So Chris and I put together this preliminary chart which shows kind of the costs that are likely needed or deferred items, and just kind of walk through what they are. And then at the bottom it talks about remaining available funds. So if you just kind of roll your eyes to the bottom, we have a remaining $77,708 in the overall $1 million that we requested from the MSBA as part of the original feasibility. And then there was the $41,500 that was transferred as part of the district-wide study. So that $138,000 is what's available for the costs. So back to the top of the slide, the ANRAD and the vernal pool, the proposal from LEC to go out there and validate whether that is a vernal pool or whether it is just a wetland, and including locking in the other wetlands that are on site and filing it with Concom and attending a couple of hearings, is the $12,650. I will note that the vernal pool requests obviously permission from the owner of that property to enter their property, so there is an item that we need to sort out with the owner of the Startline Brewery to access their property and talk about the properties of that pond in the back of the site at this point. So we would recommend moving forward with that. The second is the traffic proposal. We had presented that to you the last go around. It was $64,500 at that point. We've since got rid of those couple intersections on Main Street, as well as reduced the number of overall meetings. And Perkins has waived their markup on that, and so that brings that down to $59,000 that we're recommending moving forward with. And so these first two items are what we would be looking for approval tonight. But before we get to that, I want to talk about the remaining costs that are on the horizon. As Dan just noted, we will need to do a hydrant flow test. Normally we do this before we get through schematic. It's short money. We have the data from Marathon, but it's not current, so it's more of a worst case scenario. And if the fire department or others don't have the ability to assist with that, one option is to do it on our own, or we could not do it and just rely on the older data. Another potential item is test pits for percolation of water. So one of the things that the engineers need to do is understand the flow rate, so they understand how big and what the sand requirements are for the recharge chambers on site. So we could dig test pits and then flood them and test the percolation. It's not really close to get a hose out there, so some of the logistics of that we still need to kind of work through how we would even go about doing that, but it's a nice to have if we can achieve it. So these are in the deferred but need to be vetted further column off to the right. Concom and ANRAD, so as part of the Concom filing, they're also going to hire their own consultant that will validate what our consultant says, which is yes, they agree, both sides agree on the limits of the wetlands. So an ANRAD is a request for determination, which simply put is saying this is where we think the wetland stops. Can you please validate and confirm so that we can agree on both sides, lock it in, and that lets the design team move forward with their design and not wait till we're deep into design and then have to redesign roadways and parking lots around those setbacks. So it's the right thing to do. That's an allowance of potentially $5,000, which we may not need all of that, but we wanted to put that on there. Since our last meeting, we've this group in the working group has engaged Eversource Mass Save Reimbursement Rebate Program. Part of their program is they also have a peer reviewer to evaluate the submissions from the project team, and there's also an a la carte menu of things that we could put together to have their assistance with in terms of the efficiency of the building, things they see that could help us dial in the efficiency of the building. We don't have a proposal yet. That $12,000 is a placeholder. We have to talk with Thornton Tomasetti about the items that Perkins would not provide and then decide whether we think it's a value for Thornton Tomasetti to provide. So that's also a placeholder. The miscellaneous expenses for $7,000 is if there's a road show leading up to town meeting, if you guys decide you want mailers or boards or posters around town, simply put, that's probably the majority of the things that would fit into that miscellaneous expenses category. And then the remaining two would be to collect additional geotechnical information. These two, I think, are beyond our means, but I wanted to put that out there for conversation because they would be nice to haves. The first is additional geotechnical test pits or borings, and we may be able to break off some of that depending on what's left at the end of the day with the funding remaining in the project. The geothermal test well, we don't have a quote in hand, but I think, Dan, you got one that was
You
in
do
that
have one,
range.
yeah, it's about that.
So it's about $50,000 to come and drill your first well, and so that's actually drilling your first well. That becomes part of the permanent solution, and that tells you the thermal conductivity of your ground, and that would help influence how many wells you need on the site. So overall, if we don't do a test well, the design team will err on the side of caution, and we'll have more wells in the overall budget, which just means a bigger number that we go to town meeting with versus a more conservative or less conservative number if we had more information available. So on the left side of the ledger in the kind of likely category, that total is about $95,000, and on the right side, total about $78,000. If we utilize the $95,000 and against our remaining $138,000, you can see at the bottom of this chart, that's about $23,000 left to deal with the stuff on the right side of the column that we may or may not pursue. I don't know, Dan, did I forget anything or anything you want to comment about
No,
that?
those are pretty much the, I mean, I might suggest that we do get a number for geotechnical and then ask her to dig the test pits too.
Right.
And
So-
see if there's some combination of those two things that, maybe that makes that number into something we can do.
I
Knock
think
them
so. I
both
think, you know, with the 23,000 remaining, I think we can get some test pits, and we just got to solve the water percolation situation, because we want to do the test pits deep on the site. And as Chris and I know, because we traipsed out there this afternoon through the thick of the thorn brush, you know, getting out there is not too easy in the beginning. Once you get past that buffer zone, it does open up, but getting a water truck out there would not be an easy task. So, any questions on the remaining costs or the things that are out there that, you know, may or may not be an issue? Tonight, we're asking you to approve the first two items, which would ultimately be a contract amendment to Perkins, which was included in your packet, amendment number 4, which is a total of that $12,650 and the $59,000. And then the other items are advising you on what's coming down the road, and then the wish list that remains with our $23,000 earmark.
Question on the geotechnical test borings, which is a deferred item, it says additional, so is there already some geotechnical information?
Yeah, we have, yes, there is. We have two, basically on two sides of each one of the buildings. So we had 2 done on the west and 2 done on the east. But typically you'd want to do 8 or 9 or 10. Like you'd want to try to get into each wing and, you know, get a kind of a better cross section. But we do have 2 borings out there and where our proposed building footprint is.
So the first couple of borings we call the flavor test, right? You understand, you know, what's the general geology of the site, and so we have that information. We certainly have data from Marathon, but over a quarter mile, that stuff can drastically change, including ledge and other things. So we like to do a second boring program, and we will do it in design development if we can't afford it now. But then that locks in and gives us better understanding of where ledge is on the site, and did the soil change, and what is the consistency, and do we need a different design foundation for a portion of the building, or is it all homogeneous under the building itself? Because you will find pockets of differential soil conditions, maybe less so in this type of a wooded environment, but it certainly exists, and the risk is always out there, and risk comes with dollars, essentially. I will say that there's lots of rocks out there. You know, we thought at the time we built Marathon that we were going to hit lots of ledge because we also saw lots of rocks. We did not hit ledge on Marathon. We hit lots of rocks and lots of boulders that were processed on site, but having walked back there today, I'm seeing a lot of the same. There's a lot of rocks at the surface, but it may be similarly those field stones that get rolled up to the New England walls that you see along the properties. There were a couple of beefy ones, but most of them were small or just at the top of the surface.
Other questions?
The vernal pool, if it's determined that it is a wetland, how does it impact the overall plans?
Oh, it's going to
Significant
be either a
impact?
wetland or a vernal pool, and they have different setbacks. So the no-build zone in the setback for the vernal pool is greater. than the wetland.
And we can probably highlight that when we get to that portion of the
The
presentation.
vernal pool is greater than the
The vernal
Vernal
pool is
pool is
greater,
greater than
It's a-
wetland.
has a
What is
greater
that?
setback.
It's like 125 foot.
It's 125 foot versus,
A wetland starts at 100, but you're allowed to go up to 50. 50 becomes the sacred zone, so in a vernal pool, the sacred zone's the 125, so. It's 75 feet, and it's in the location of where your parking lot is in the front of the school, so, there are ways around that, like including pushing the building back further on the site, but then we're paying for more roadway, and, we know we're trying to balance not having too much roadway and asphalt on the site, so.
it'd be ideal for it to be a wetland, because then it's probably 50 feet away. We're outside if it's buffer zone now, but if it's a vernal pool, we're not.
Yeah, I thought it was, in my mind, I thought wetland was unfavorable, but it's the other way around.
Yeah. This thing is unfavorable. Vernal pool, potential vernal pools are less favorable. Other questions?
Okay, so if there are no other questions, we're seeking a motion to approve the contract amendment, the amendment number 4 to the contract for designer services with Perkins Eastman. Yeah, that's what we're looking for. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
In the amount of 71,000.
$650.
In the amount of
$50.
additional $71,600.
Yeah.
$650.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mike, second by Bill. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, then it is unanimous. And so next we're on to faculty and staff focus groups.
Yeah, so next week, April 4th, 5th, and 6th, we have earmarked, and I understand being scheduled right now are the focus groups for faculty. So this is our chance to have, a little bit more than one-on-one, but kind of small group discussions with representatives from each of the grade classrooms, teachers, with all the programs that you see here, ESOL, special education is actually a big one. There's quite a number of programs within that, art, music, health, physical education. So what this does is it allows us to go from these feasibility plans where we know the size of spaces, we know what the MSBA guidelines are, and start to dive in and understand a little bit more about what are the activities happening within, what are the equipment and the furnishings and things that are desired that would be useful. We talk about where the rooms are located and how the doorways into the rooms, the transparency within the rooms, pretty much everything you need to come back with a three-dimensional model of what each room looks like. So that the idea is to collect all this information now, get to work on it. It'll help us sort of refine what the spaces need and start to get the scope ironed out in more detail. Before the summer break, we'll come back with those three-dimensional layouts so that we can review with teachers and say, what did we get right? What do we still need to work on? And by no means will that even be the last round of meetings with them. So that'll happen through the next phases after town meeting when we're in design development. It'll happen again in construction documents. It'll happen probably sometime in construction because years go by, and things like technology, we'll have an idea of what we need to provide now, and technology will of course change, so we'll be back to refine this.
Just an important note to add, as part of that effort, we're going to be meeting both with Elmwood staff and faculty and Hopkins staff and faculty so that we understand the perspective of both the second, third, and fourth grade teachers and the needs of those students so that we make sure that we're collectively gathering all the information that's needed.
And I would just add, as a prelude to that, we actually did last week, the 21st and 22nd, we did kind of a general meeting about this subject with both groups of teachers, both schools via Zoom, and I thought they were very successful.
Yeah, they were.
So I think it got these questions out to anybody who tuned into it, so then they'll be able to have these discussions with their representatives for these focus groups. So not only we will get the focus groups intentions, but I think we'll get a lot of information through them from the other staff as well. So I thought they were great meetings last week.
Yeah, and I think our first round, the intent is to meet at each school with the teachers from each school, and then later in the process, start to come together.
I appreciate that these are in person. I think that's important.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And the only other thing I'll add is there are spaces or things that really don't have ownership. You know, when we talk about restrooms or just the corridor lockers or, you know, breakout rooms, the family resource center, for example. So all of these spaces will kind of have a safety net and be working with the ELT. We'll also be asking teachers along the way about the breakout spaces and how they would envision using them. So hopefully we'll get everything and limit surprises. We'll catch every office we need.
No, I think this is great to outline, and certainly I think something that'll be worth mentioning again at our forum on the 4th, because this is a question that has come up. I've heard from several community members as to what is the extent to which the teachers who are going to be in the building are engaged in the design of the building. So I think this is something the community will want confirmation.
I'm wondering, would there be any benefit to having anyone from Marathon talk with you folks, or you've already done that, to kind of get their perspective of a new school that just was built, what they would do differently?
Yeah, that actually rings a bell. I think we maybe talked about that as something we may want to set up. I don't know if that would be more of a general forum versus these small focus groups, but something we'd be interested in doing.
I think we had talked about
And Lauren DeBow and I have talked a lot about little things, and she's sort of advising as I tell her what we're up to. I also invited her library media specialist to join us, because we have only one librarian, and their librarian team opened up a substantial library, and I think they felt, and Lauren agreed, that her librarian has information that our librarian, who's brand new to this role, really could benefit from having. So we'll invite them to ours, and
Okay.
and as we go along, whatever makes sense.
Yeah,
They're
and
open to supporting.
certainly with the specialty programs like art, music, the nurse, the library, those things where you only have one resource yourself, it makes
Yeah.
sense to bring in the other resources within the district.
Although I don't know if I should bring the art teacher into it, since she's currently on a cart at that might add insult to injury.
Well, that brings up a good
Should have
point.
for a transfer.
That brings up a good point, because you hear a lot about meetings over the course of this whole process, and what this really is an opportunity is for the architect and his team to ask questions. They want to understand how the space operates for the people involved. They don't want to bring in, sort of impose a strategy on the teachers at each level. We want to understand what information can they bring to the table, and how will that shape the direction that we take. And so it's a really important step in the process, and the more that we get outside thoughts from anyone in the district who has knowledge of how the district ultimately wants to operate, the better building you will get.
Any other questions about those forums? No? Okay. Site design?
And then, yeah, so moving on, the meetings that Tim mentioned had a little bit of a kind of theme to them. So we used the all-staff meetings. They occurred going to go with what you said, Tim, the 21st,
22nd, I believe, yeah.
But over the course of those two meetings, we shared what the current design is, a little bit about the process, and then we also started to talk about some of the site categories, and the three that you see here, understanding recess and outdoor spaces, outdoor learning spaces versus the physical education spaces, and then also a discussion about arrival and dismissal. So what you see here are highlights from that. We'll actually be issuing or providing copies of the meeting notes from that presentation. But on recess, we heard a lot of things that might change how we design or think about the outdoor space, from kids choosing their play space, which may then tell us maybe we're designing to migrate through the age groups a little bit so that there are fields with play equipment that is for younger ages versus zoned for the older students. We heard a lot about the different types of spaces. We talked about the fields versus hard surface, basketball and playscape. Lots of love for swings. Interestingly, we heard that just sort of atypical space, covered tables, would be good for projects or work or games or anything, which does become a nice alternative. The walking path is also a wonderful alternative for students that just want to do laps or be part of a club, mile club, or do something different with their time in recess. The visibility and fencing came up again, certainly, as well as the idea of using some of the lawn maybe in the front so that there's flexible space for waiting. We know we're going to have a canopy. We intend to have a canopy for covered waiting, but maybe a lawn. There were suggestions of an amphitheater. I'm not sure if the front would be the right place, but basically the idea of gathering space similar to, is it Little Fenway, I guess, at Elmwood. For physical education, a lot of it was also about the fire safety, so the access road, and you'll see we'll show updates. We pulled it closer to the school, and that's better from a safety standpoint. It also, it would require us to shut down or gate the road so it's not open all day during the school day. There's no compromise with vehicular traffic. The fencing at the PE fields. There was a concern for the roadway. I think this was voiced probably at the fire and safety meeting that, if the road is really around the PE fields altogether, it's just inviting traffic and daytime visitors, and so again you'll see an update of how we can mitigate that. The gate, as we talked about, the fire lane width, things we've discussed some time ago about not having students cross any traffic or parking areas, and of course keeping the generator away from the building, probably opposite the loading area, but pulling it further away from the building. And last, on arrival and dismissal, we heard the desire for large plaza, canopy, maybe having as many as 75 students that might be waiting outside. No, I guess this is a comment, no lingering during drop-off. The architecture can't really control that. Visibility again came up. Accommodating walkers and bikers, so that would be that will be a little bit more of a study itself, understanding what we're tapping into and how we get students on site and provide pathways that are safe and not right along the roadways, hopefully. That gathering space again came up, and we talked about dismissal. That could be from the gymnasium or the classrooms. We talked about arrival as well, and then the fact that there'll be 2 waves of buses. So this will affect the circulation probably more dramatically than we've looked at so far. But if we've got the marathon, half the fleet at the marathon school and half at Elmwood, and we're switching, that creates a little bit more internal traffic that we probably didn't count on early in the process. But is there anything that I missed that anybody remembers? I think there's more comprehensive notes, but those were some of the highlights.
I think I'd just reiterate, I thought those meetings were great. I thought we got a lot of great information from all those who attended it. So it was, I think they were pretty well attended too.
Yes.
The first one more than the other, right? The first one we had like 26 participants, I think, and the second one, which is really the most we've had at a forum so far.
Yeah, we had about 18 to 20 staff in addition to the project team on the first one, and I think we had 10 or 12 on the second one.
Yeah.
And they were very engaged.
Well,
Yeah.
it's a fun part of the process, because like one of the things I always loved about this profession is that you learn everything there is to know about so many other people's jobs. And it's a chance for the architect and their team to really drill down, and it's hard to not feel engaged when you're having a discussion about what you do every day and why it's important and how you would like to do it better. And so it can be a really helpful part of the process.
And I think seeing visually seeing what's possible had to have been really exciting for all of the teachers, especially those who are at Hopkins and are trying to wrap their head around making a shift. I think seeing the amazing spaces and all of the thoughtful things that you shared, I think that if it were me, it would be hard not to get excited about it, at least a little bit.
Yeah, I failed to mention that this was really facilitated by our landscape architect team. So they're getting busy on responding to what they heard. We had a lot of meetings.
Just a whole meeting recap.
The school council meeting, I guess, just generally, it was pretty positive feedback and reactions to what's developing so far. There were some comments about expansion, just trying to understand how, given the nature of what Hopkinton is going through, how that's accommodated, how that's planned for. The overall schedule was discussed, safety and security was discussed, and then some of the play and green space was also discussed.
And this was just Elmwood School Council. And so for people who may not be familiar, it's a mix of, there were some teachers, administrators, and Elmwood parents that make up that school council. So it was a nice kind of mini forum opportunity to get some of that feedback and input and where people's questions and comments were at this stage. And that was, again, I thought it was a very engaged group, as you'd expect.
Would we consider inviting the Marathon School Council to future meetings, just because next year's kindergartners would be the fall of 27 students, so it might be helpful to also have parents from like the next generation of students. I will say that I'm on the Marathon School Council, and Ms. DeBow did bring up Elmwood at our last meeting and gave a brief update, and it was very helpful. But I know people were asking her some questions, so they might be another group to just tap into in terms of parents who are interested and engaged on a regular basis.
Good idea.
That's great.
Yeah, because 27 seems so far away, but in reality, it's
Yeah,
not
but it's
for the kids.
in so many other ways. Yeah.
We're definitely up for that. This would be, that would
They're
be
pretty
great.
small groups, so I don't think it would make it too large.
And I think we talked about that, maybe having a Hopkins and a Marathon coming up.
Okay. Any other questions about that? No? Okay. Got some site and plan updates to review.
Yeah, so on to the updates. Starting with the site, what we're looking at is the prior site plan. I didn't include the macro, but obviously the Marathon School is just off the top of the screen. You can see here what we've been referring to, where the paving goes around, pretty much surrounds the physical education fields. The buses would branch off, was the early plan, along one side of the field, and cars would branch off on the other, and that separates the cars and the buses. Cars would loop around the front. And so this was kind of the early look at the plan. The vernal pool that was being described earlier, or not the vernal pool, the
Wetlands?
The wetland that is going to be assessed is down in this corner, and it doesn't look like we've got
I can
a.
see the fish in it from here.
Starting line can have a fishing
Do you know what
tournament.
that is? Is that the
That's the setback for
the
it.
125?
That's the 125.
Okay, so right now we're showing the 125, and you can see it crosses over the roadway and a chunk of the parking. So to contrast this, the progress or the studies that we're under right now takes the road from Marathon and only crosses one edge of the fields. You can see just north of the fields, there's kind of a colored zone there. That is a relocation of the parking that was in the back of the school. So as we tighten up this perimeter road, which this shows a road that's tighter to the building, the idea is it would be closed off, so we really don't want parking on that, so it can be closed off. In some schools, some districts, there are actually lines painted on it, can become part of the hard surface play. So that's the big change. I think we know that there's a lot more to really figure out here, but what this does show is more than 2 lanes, possibly 3 lanes coming from Marathon. And we're looking at the idea of the yellow dotted line, if the buses actually came around the front, kind of swapping with the cars, and that would be for arrival and departure. What that does is it allows the full drop-off zone. You can see it goes past the front door. It allows the buses who are would be basically in the habit of using the entire drop-off zone, so it would guarantee that that's used. If it's used for cars, cars are going to inherently want to stop at the front door and not go further. So it's just a thought that may be a better use of the front. What this does is it splits the cars off, and the car queue for 85 cars goes past the PE fields right now, back up towards Marathon. So it would want a dedicated lane. We wouldn't want to mix it with the buses. It's kind of a boulevard style where the cars would split off and then drop off where we showed the buses before, kind of on the north side of the, from the gym, going backwards to the PE fields, and they would exit by going around the school. The idea is that although that's cars during drop-off and pickup, that would be gated, potentially gated and not open during the day. But there's a lot to sort out. I'm not sure that works on its own as an idea. It was just a study. I think also returning buses back to, or at least half the fleet of buses back to Marathon would require the dedicated lane. So although this is a different approach, it looks like it's really changed and reduced or tightened up the paving. We may have added some paving to get the extra lanes going back and forth between Marathon and this project. So this is I'm just showing you progress in a study, so we've got more iterations to develop, and we want the traffic engineer involved in some of this. So I guess it's a preview, and interested in any thoughts and ideas as we look at this.
Can I ask how staff parking is impacted by the queuing up? Meaning, if there's a queuing of cars, can staff not get into their lot?
So that's a good question. If we're separating cars from buses, we'd want to make sure that we've got the lanes so that everyone can pass. So I don't know how that would work exactly in this plan.
We've had challenges at Elmwood where someone who's trying to leave, like maybe right at dismissal before buses have completely cleared out, they have a doctor's appointment, they can't get out. It can cause a lot of stress, and the same could be true in the morning if someone were late on purpose, and then they can't get into the school because of the queuing. That's just something that maybe we should think about. Is how do we give them access in and out without it, because we do know that this queuing thing at Elmwood now, they start at 2 p.m. for a 3:15 dismissal.
Yeah, so I think we have still a long way to go with this.
Okay.
But this was a
Maybe
first
just make
attempt
it
at the reduction, and I think we don't have it figured out.
Yeah.
It was also additional information that came out of our meeting last week when we had the lengthy discussion with the teachers about their concerns about how dismissal occurs at the different schools, and the suggestion to look at how Marathon currently operates and understanding Marathon's need to separate their parents from their buses, and also the multi-staged bus approach that they need to use that wouldn't have necessarily been what we assumed at Elmwood initially. So as Perkins has looked at other options, this is sort of that first step in looking at those other options, and as we gather that additional information, we'll probably continue to see this evolve.
Right, I think there's a lot of improvements in the way that you've consolidated the asphalt and the roadways themselves, but the interconnection will still need parents to be able to get to that front lot as well. So we'll have to have some sort of an interchange at the top of the field where those boulevard kind of meets the rest of the road. So.
Yeah, we had talked about where that rain garden is. That could potentially be like a raised kind of drive over for certain times during the day, because there is going to have to be some way to get back and forth.
Yeah.
Can you explain the, on the north side of the building, the difference between the sort of dash and dotted line versus the dash line that's just like a little bit on the inside of that?
Sure. So the double dotted line is the property line. The national symbol for the parcels or property. And then the dotted line that's inside there is the setback that,
It's too big of a setback, but it is the setback that they put on the, they have been using. They have been using one that's too big, but
Like,
they have 100 feet on here.
When you say that, what do you mean?
The setback for this
Property
kind of lot,
setback?
they had went with a very conservative interpretation because there's two buildings on this. They interpreted it as potentially a campus, and a campus has different setbacks. So they had a 100-foot setback, which I argued to them that's not that, it's 25 feet. So they just haven't reset their setbacks to 25 feet.
So there is wiggle room there if the road needed to go?
Yep.
Okay, that's kind of where it was, okay.
There's not a lot, but there
Right.
is some.
There's a little bit,
so I'll move on I don't know if there are any other questions. Can you move on to the building itself? So this is what you saw as the last floor plan.
Thank you.
This was the prior schematic plan. And then if I jump ahead and tell you what we've done, working through 2 or 3 educational leadership meetings. The first thing we did early on, we decoupled the staff lunchroom from the cafeteria. It was based on just some comments we heard at Marathon that maybe that was a good thing. We're hearing here that it probably does want to still be down on the first floor. So this first big arrow would be, okay, let's move the staff lunchroom down to the first floor. We also heard that the nurse suite would really benefit greatly from being more contiguous or connected to the admin, the upfront administration area. So we looked at that. That would give us some room to move the staff lunchroom, and then the nurse would move to the admin guidance. When we do that, the admin guidance gets a little, or the admin gets a little bit bigger in this location. That means the media center might shift, so the main portion of the media center would be on the second floor versus the first floor. So remember, the media center is 2 stories, and that might work out better on a number of fronts. What that does is we would have the media center split on 2 floors, but connected with a stairwell and the elevator being relocated. We'd have access within the media center with the elevator as well as a stairwell. It also allows the main media center to just naturally overlook and see into the first level of media center spaces. And if the media center is truly the heart of the school, you'll see both floor levels when you come in the lobby. When you're in the media center, you'll be connected to both floor levels. But it puts it truly at the center of the school vertically as well as kind of in plan. So this was some of the thinking. This is where the arrows go. You also can see the number 1, 2, 3 on floors 2 and 3. Part of the desire was also to maybe separate some of the administration and the counseling spaces so that they were more representative with each wing. So if the school is organized with a grade level per wing, that we'd have counselor and assistant principal kind of with each wing on each floor. That has the added benefits of dispersing adult supervision, passive supervision, eyes on the street throughout the school. It's a safety concept that we see has some benefits and better connects each neighborhood of learning with their assistant principal and with counselors. So these are all the moves, and then this is what the plan looks like. So to the eye, the reason I showed all those arrows was if you look at it, it takes study to see what's changed. One of the other important things that we did, it's more subtle, but you can see the purple are the special education spaces. They're dispersed. They always have been in our plans. But some of the special education spaces are more shared, like OTPT or the social emotional learning space or the suite of special education offices. Others are really, like the learning centers are with each grade, really being dispersed. So one of the fine points on this plan is that we made sure that no matter what you do in the future, if you organize by floor or you organize by wing, there are 2 ESOL rooms on every floor, in every wing. There are 2 learning centers on every floor, in every wing. So that took a little bit of jockeying, but it just makes it more flexible. And you'd never know that if I didn't say that. You can see in this plan the admin and nurse up front. It did add a little bit of square footage because to make that connection between the admin and nurse, we've got kind of an internal corridor. But the rooms seem to be working out well together. The nurse up front and by the gymnasium is maybe an added benefit. That may be a preferred location. The secondary entrance that's by the gymnasium also creates a more discreet exit if there were an emergency or ambulance that arrived to the building, so it's not part of the main lobby, not visible from the CAF. So that seems to work out well. We think the media center is working out better in this location, and I think improvements all around. So we'll be sharing this when we meet with the faculty, just a highlight of where the plan is now, and then getting into detail and getting more information about each space. Definitely open to thoughts and questions.
Any questions or thoughts on current schematic plan?
Do you have a designated speech and language classroom or space, or, I don't know that we've ever talked about that. And it would be part of special ed.
Yes, we have speech and language.
Okay.
We do. And one of the things we talked about more recently, it's not in this plan, are the paras. I think I'll get this wrong for now, but it always takes a while. It'll take several iterations to get all the special education spaces exactly right, but some of the paras, maybe somewhere between 7 to 10, making sure that if they're not in a room, that they've got a place to hang up and lock their belongings and to be. So it's not adding to the program. We're going to be looking at what some of the media center space is, maybe some space or cabinetry within the main office, and other ways that we can accommodate that.
I see that there's like an IEP conference room. Are there any other like conference room on each level for teams to meet, or in each wing is there a conference room? Just thinking about like professional learning communities for teachers.
Yeah, there are testing rooms that are small, more 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 type spaces scattered on each floor and close to each wing. The main conference rooms are the IEP, and there's one at the main office, so that would be on the first and second floor. There isn't a large conference room on the third floor. There is a book room, which if we look at the Elmwood example, the book room can be done efficiently and also be multi-purpose. It could be media.
And we talked about the media center too, as being a potential either PLC space or other professional meeting area for
Yeah.
teachers.
If my memory serves me, I think the current media centers at each school are about 2,000 square feet. We have 6,000 square feet total. So we've put about 4,000 in a main media center. So it should be ample space to carve up in different ways. And then we have another 2,000, which is kind of the first floor space that will be more teacher-guided, flexible use, even professional development use.
Well, didn't you say that you can't really put a PLC room, that the MSBA won't, they won't pay for that, but we can take space out of the media center and
or
meet if we want, or
have it as what we would call multi-purpose, flexible use. So we've done that in a number of schools. So portions of the media center can really convert to become.
We talked about accordion doors and things like that maybe we could add.
Yeah, one of the schools that we'll be touring has that. It actually has a wall that has a bunch of fins that you can open up for media center use and close off to become professional development space. So.
We have something similar at the last school that I worked in. The PLC space was in the media center, it would just acoustically want to continue to have privacy if teachers are talking about student data or things
Right.
like that to think about, but it did work.
Any other thoughts, comments, questions on the schematic plan?
You know, the height is the average all the way around the building.
Okay.
This,
think we can-
this little show works to
Oh.
our advantage.
Forgot that was there. That's
This
great.
is, yeah, I forgot this was here. This is just a massing update, it's part of the design update, I guess. What we're showing here, it's color coded just to show 1-story versus 2-story versus 3-story. I think the building is set up pretty nice so that the 3-story is pushed back and that the approach to the school will be that 1- and 2-story experience, so it creates a scaled environment. When we look at precedent studies or even go on tours, we're not likely to be able to resculpt the building because the program's in the right place, but I think it is set up
Yeah.
to really be workable as far as what the goals are for scale. Any questions on massing? Didn't realize I had so much to present. These are
These go with your massing.
okay. So these are precedent images. Oops, I went way ahead. The only thought here is it's really just to share some examples from other schools. I'm going to show you some stuff that I think is good and some stuff that I think is not as good. But there's nothing required. We're not making a decision, but we'd love to hear any thoughts on what you see, what seems to be successful, maybe what doesn't. It can also include materials, but for the most part, what we tried to gather were the majority of 3-story strategies that we've seen. So this is not a 3-story building that we're starting with. This is the Easton Elementary School, but the reason I put it in here, it's a watercolor. It's actually built. It will be one of the schools on the tour, but a really strong horizon line at the 1-story level that becomes your entry. It also became outdoor learning space and waiting space with each one of the learning neighborhoods. Was a visual and something that was emphasized in this school, so that it would create that scale upon approach. This is an example from most of these are not Perkins Eastman. I just gathered a mix of schools. It looks like this building is using different materials to break up the building, make it feel like a collection of different boxes and forms. In this case, I think they've tried something similar where it's a strong horizon in this porch, but I think the thing that I would want to be aware of here is that it also can feel dark and heavy. Like I feel the heavy masonry above that porch as a weight. But it is, in this case, depending on the site or whatever they were dealing with, maybe they had no choice but to start pretty abruptly with a 3-story building. We have the benefit of starting with 1- and 2-story in the front of our building. This is an example of a school that just, I think it again took a 3-story structure that was right up on the approach, tried to put a small portion of 2-story and canopy, but I think it has a monolithic quality with the same material that's not necessarily using many materials to break it up. I think the entry canopy up at a 2nd floor level doesn't quite feel intimate. I'm not sure that this, I think this is an elementary school. I'm not sure of the grade levels.
It is.
I think it's a regular
It's elementary.
K-5.
Yeah.
It's also,
School is cool.
through some of these too, you'll see landscaping
My grandkids are playing football.
at the entry or not at the entry. That can go a long way. In this case, you're seeing hard surface, not just the building, but the paving right to the pavement. And so sometimes that green space and buffers can do a lot to how you feel about the school. This is another example. In this case, the elementary school is using flares and pops of color and kind of window or pop outs from the rooms to try to break it up. In this case, it doesn't have the two-story canopy, it drops down to one story, but again, it's still a lot of three-story, pretty immediate. This one does have buffer space, green space and trees, so it's a little bit more generous, I think, before you get to any of the paving. We can't really see the cars in the paving, but still a lot of hard surface.
I mean, one just sort of reaction to the ones you've showed so far is even in something like this where they seem to take great pains to make the three-story look not so kind of intimidating, the one-story, two-story, three-story build that you have in the massing diagram I think is so important, because even this just looks like a huge building when I think about 7-year-olds walking up to go to school there.
Yeah, agreed. This we probably can't do. I guess it is also a two-story, but here, the roof form does a lot to help break down the scale. Not sure how efficient, and it looks like there's a lot of space that's built above the second story. Not sure how it's used. This is a mix of materials that definitely helps break down the scale. Lots of generous lawn and a pathway leading up to the school. This one, much like the other ones, is immediate three-story. This one is relying on the material warmth to not feel so intimidating. I imagine, the materials really can do a lot to warm up your feeling and your approach to the school, but on their own, I don't think entirely mitigate the scale.
Building's gray now, by the way.
Because they didn't stain it,
Yeah.
because it's too much to keep staining it. Maintenance comes in, when you use Ipe wood like this, it's,
Well, in that one too, I remember a discussion we had in Marathon about the windows, right? So those
Which one? This one?
long, tall window interior. There's a lot of benefits to that style window, but exterior it looks really institutional.
right, there's a lot of different materials in all these images that he's showing you, and they all come with different complexities, different costs, different maintenance, and, we're trying to get a flavor of what you guys respond to and what you like and what pops out.
This one is a mix of materials. It does do the terracing, so you've got one story, two story, three story. It probably does it a little abruptly, maybe, a little quicker. Again, don't know the constraints that they were under here, but this is very sensitive.
It is. Sorry, it's new.
Just like a toner.
In this case, you can see plaza space, green space up front that maybe helps a bit. But a lot of the hardscape right up to the school, too, feels a little cold to me. This one I'm going to show from a distance and a little bit closer up. So this is a school in Winchester. From a distance, it seems, again, like a lot of three-story. It's got a mix of materials. It looks like it's got a one-story porch. Up close, you can see it actually, I think it's relatively successful at scaling. That one-story canopy piece does a lot. You feel like a lot of this is two-story, even though from a distance you can see that third story. They even changed the material on the third story, maybe, as well as pushing it back so it disappears a little bit. Warm materials down low, and again, generous with the plaza in the front. This one's interesting. So this one is, pretty much all the same material, except the third floor is right there or relatively close, and it's an entirely different material. This actually is a rendering, but so I don't know what the final photo is, but so this basically feels like two-story, even though there's a significant third story here. There's two views of this. This is one of the schools we'll be touring as well. So this one has 1- and 2-story elements that are in the immediate foreground, and then 3-story, not pushed too far back. Lots of green space upon approach. So you can see it's got some mix of materials. The third story is still relatively close to the 2-story. And then this is the last one. This is a school that's really the 3-story is mostly off to the left-hand side. There's a lot going on this school as far as forms and materials, and then, up close, this canopy feels a little bit too high to me. It's technically one story, but it's kind of a tall one story. And it looks like it's a mix of materials and brick and natural feel, so.
They also have the exaggerated, upper canopies and the upper levels of the wings that kind of go up in the last image if you go back. On the left and right, you'll see that, that kind of tilts to the sky where the library and the media center are, and that kind of mimicking the canopy, essentially. They do that in some of their other designs, too.
Yeah. So that's all. That's a collection that we had. There are worse examples, and there are better examples. I think we'll see a lot when we go on the tours. There's fun stuff in the landscape. I love that this one has the balls that are out on the, kind of anchored down, and those become actually preventative measures so that cars can't, cross over into the pedestrian zone.
When you have a situation like we do, a newer school very close to this school, do you find towns, or you recommend that it be something completely different looking, or some similarities to it? Or is there any trend that you see when you're near another newer school?
I guess that's kind of open for discussion because, if you wanted it to feel like a campus, you'd start to pick up on the materiality, and you might even, not that our scope can do this, but, have similar signage and, for the grade levels. There's also the argument that you'd really want to make this specific and have some ownership and personality that's unique to these grade levels so that they feel like they're part of something special for these years.
Must have something to do with proximity too, right? Like, I don't know that you're gonna necessarily see the Marathon School from the Elmwood School.
Not at the same time.
But if they were right next to each other, maybe that would.
And they're not super visible from the road
Yeah,
as well.
right.
I mean, one thing I appreciate about this is the variety, but also the vantage points you gave us, because I think there's so much that can be done when we talk about that exterior. The most critical part of that exterior is what does it look like for those kids walking up to that school in the morning. And I would have said you did this on purpose, but you forgot the massing diagrams were in there, because my first reaction to the massing diagrams was how many people are going to say to us, wow, that's a big building. And on those massing diagrams, it's being built for 1,200 students. It is a big building. But those pictures show the various ways that we're going to have in the design process to make sure that it doesn't feel like a huge building to the students, staff, the faculty who are going to be there every day. So I think the order that you set those up in actually really, really helped.
Yeah, and I think the nice thing is you'll never see more than a half or a third of the building
Right.
at once. It's not a long wing, they're short.
Yep. Yeah, no one's going to be looking at it from this vantage point.
So that's what we had as far as design updates.
Okay. Any other questions related to design updates or what we're going to be seeing upcoming or anything like that?
Well, you mentioned a couple of times you'll be touring this, be touring that. When do you have a time frame for that, or what does that involve?
So we're gonna, the working group, the superintendent and John, we've invited and scheduled a few tours for the 14th that we're trying to, and we can open that up to others, but we obviously want to keep it at a manageable size as we're touring it while the school is in session during the daytime, so that you can see the way the ebb and flow of students in the facility. So right now, we're targeting Friday the 14th of April to do 3 schools in a day and make a day out of it. But if others want to come, let us know, and we can certainly add you to the list.
Other questions? Okay, so I think we're on to next steps.
Next steps is the community forum, which is scheduled for next Tuesday. So we need to get the date's posted on the website, but we need to get the link out there. So,
Okay.
we'll rely on the school department to push that out to all the usual constituents. And then, John, I think we need to get it up on the town's website too, and try and I think get it out on the Facebook groups that we're trying the different vehicle this time, which is a full Zoom session. We're doing webinar Zoom, so everyone can do it from the comfort of their home. Log in, and we'll try that to see if that has any higher rate of success than the prior in-person and HCAM presentations.
And we're gonna use the Q&A function from Zoom, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that's how people can ask.
Right, so unlike last
questions
time where we
directly
pieced it
through-
together with the
Right.
emails, this will be a live chat function. Q&A coming into us, and we can respond live as questions come in. And the content of that presentation would be the images, the floor plans and site plans that you saw tonight, or whatever variation Bob that. But not something you haven't seen before. And then we're not ready to show the massing yet, so it would really be about, the content would be a recap of the PSR conclusion. If you recall, last time we had a full presentation, was right before the vote. So we would present them the cost, the kind of conclusion of the decision that occurred in February amongst all the committees and towns, and then we would go into the current floor plan and site plan, and then a meeting schedule of kind of the road ahead, getting through the final approval in August, and then the MSBA and town funding in October and November. So it's kind of how we got through PSR, and then schedule, and then the latest floor plans and site plans. So that's the content that we're intending to present.
Is there anything else that anybody thinks we should include in there? Wondering if we should do a cutout for the traffic process. Do like a short version of what we had at was it our last meeting or the meeting before that?
So we can, I also want to be mindful of the number of meetings we bring the consultant to, and
I'm not even
and having
suggesting we necessarily bring Vinod to it. I'm
Okay.
just wondering if, and I mean, I'm happy to do it, I think it's just so front of mind for people that as many ways as we can say, look, this is the time frame, this is what we're looking at, this is,
And those
I think from a-
milestones could be added to the
From a
schedule.
time frame standpoint, I'm happy to put that out there. I think
Yeah.
you released at the beginning of this month them to do that traffic study.
right,
So the forum that we were targeting for the beginning of June was when it was gonna be baked. You guys will review the results, and then it's primed to put out in front of the public. So that was the philosophy.
I'm not looking to say anything more than, honestly, what you just said in a little bit more detail. I don't expect that we're gonna be providing them any conclusions. I
Yeah,
think
we should
that
provide a timeline.
It's valuable in that forum for the community to hear that this is the process that's ongoing right now, maybe even hear a little bit about some of the things we did to accelerate/expand, because we know it's such a significant factor, and when they can expect to hear a lot of the findings of that, I think would be valuable in that.
Yeah, I think that's great for implanting in there from an advertising, the
Yes.
content of the meeting. I'd rather focus on the PSR, cost, and then, the floor plans itself as
Mhm.
we're pushing the information out there so that people don't come looking for results on the traffic at this particular forum.
Agreed. Okay. Anything else? Okay. So, is that it?
I believe that's it.
So, yeah, the only other thing for upcoming meetings, we're gonna have a few breakout meetings on mechanical systems with Tim and his team. We're gonna have some other targeted meetings that focus on, sort of niche areas of the school like food service and IT. And then, we'll be back with this group to talk about sustainable design, net zero, and the mechanical systems on May 9th.
No, we got
I'm sorry.
We got the 11th too.
And then the 11th, when we're next back with this group, sorry, I skipped
April
over that one. April 11th.
We'll go over the agenda
Um,
for that.
We'll go over, it'd be chapter 149 versus CMR at risk. We'll be having that discussion, and we'll have an update on building massing.
All right.
Can I just ask, when do you think the Zoom will be posted, just for, so when I talk about this at our school committee meeting on Thursday, if any folks tune in, they can have an idea of when to look for it?
When the link will be posted?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
How does that work?
I mean, I think, can we get it posted in advance of Thursday's school
Sure.
committee meeting? Yeah, so I think we'll get the link established
I think we
before
want
that.
to get it out there
Yeah.
tomorrow. I was talking with Georgette
Yeah.
about
Tomorrow,
that today.
okay,
So we
fantastic,
can
yeah,
okay.
okay.
establish that.
Yeah.
We'll put that on the website so people
Okay.
can
And we'll,
Thank you.
pass it
we'll-
around.
We'll forward it around to the committee as a whole as well,
Okay.
so everybody has it
Great.
shared
Thank you.
appropriately. Yep. Okay, well, if there's nothing else, then, as Chris said, our next meeting, our next sort of contact point is next Tuesday, April 4th, for the Zoom public forum. And then our next official meeting of the Elementary School Building Committee will be Tuesday, April 11th, right back here at 6 o'clock. And so if there is nothing else, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Jen, is there a
Second.
second? Motion by Jen, second by Mike. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Then we are adjourned at 7:21 PM. Thank you to HCAM for broadcasting, and thank you everyone for joining us.